Well, it's 2023, and I thought there was no better way to start the year than with a horror game. Yeah, I'm a bit late with this one. Subway Midnight was a game developed by BubbyDarkstar and published by AgroCrab, more famously known for the game Going Under, among other things. It's a horror-themed, third-person walking simulator. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of walking simulators, and up until when this game came out, I didn't know anything about it. But when I heard that it was inspired by things like Beyond the Black Rainbow, and it looked like this, yeah, I like this one. BubbyDarkstar's goal was to make a haunted house experience, but on a train. With every car, the emphasis was more on the abstract, rather than something coming out of the shadows to scare the hell out of you. Now, there are jump scares, and I'll get to that later. There's about 100 cars to explore, but this game is short and very linear. It's also unlikely that you'll experience every single car in your first playthrough. My first playthrough was a little over 2 hours, but even if that's too long for you, there is an autosave feature. After a photosensitivity warning, we're in. We start as a young girl riding the train home. Even ignoring the cramped perspective, something is off. The introduction shows the game flow in miniature. You walk through various cars and experience what each one has to offer. Here, there's little in the way of actual obstacles, and more an emphasis on the spectacles, giving you something to chew on without playing its hand too early. That may seem like an understatement given the... yeah, that. After a title card, we're in the game proper. We're now another young girl who wants to ride the train. Now that we have more breathing room, let's talk about the presentation. Despite being center frame, your character is pretty far away from the camera. The perspective already makes you feel tiny, but it's like the camera doesn't even want to be there. Lakitu wants off this wild ride. The game doesn't waste its time when trying to make you feel vulnerable. There's this heavy noise filter on everything, where not only things are somewhat obscured, but depending on the color of the room, you can see this rainbow-like edge to things. Everything is either murky or just dark. One of my favorite parts about this game is the difference between the characters and the areas around them. Some of the characters are portrayed in this hand-drawn 2D style, while the train and most everything else are done in 3D. Even the station at the beginning. This got me thinking, is the whole world like this? Or is the train so haunted it's influencing the station around it? Even in the more mundane settings, the clash in styles makes the environment seem that much more hostile and unsettling, making you truly feel like you don't belong here. The best way I could describe this is like those scenes in Flapjack, when the animation suddenly changes styles to a hyper-realistic one. Everything is weird already, but those specific moments kind of emphasize the strangeness of it all. It's this kind of atmosphere that gets me hooked on strange games like this. And speaking of atmosphere, this is the game's strongest point. If you were made aware of this game from the trailer, you might be disappointed to know that there's barely any music. But even without a score, the game more than makes up for it. Now, I don't live in an area with trains, at least not yet anyway, but I did use the bus a lot when I was a kid. I actually like riding the bus. I could just turn my brain off and look out the window while listening to the Chrono Trigger soundtrack. It was great. Until one time I dared to fall asleep on the evening bus. I was greeted to my earbuds stolen, and it was pitch black outside. That's kinda how I describe the sound design of this game. The constant thumping of the train cars can lull you into complacency, and out of nowhere, the mood shifts. The game doesn't rely on audio stingers and jump scares in order to build an oppressive atmosphere, for the most part. And just like being on the bus at night, being alone in the unknown is already pretty horrifying, but being in the company of others doesn't exactly make me feel safer. However, not everything on the train is explicitly hostile. You're not the only one in this train in need of a helping hand. There are various ghosts that you can help when passing through the cars. The method for helping each ghost varies, with some being way less obvious than others. These little moments offer a bit of downtime and sometimes comedic relief, to break up that uncomfortable feeling. Each area is meant to represent the ghost that inhabits them, and despite the game taking place within a train, the environments are not so constrained. We start off in a gloomy and dark scene, then in the next car over,
did I ever tell you my favorite color was
yellow?
Where are we right now? Are we even still on the train? And who the heck is Benny?
Where the fuck is Gary?
I like how even when some areas transition to a different environment, the camera still rocks and shakes, reminding you that no matter how fantastical the environments get, we're still on a train. I'm familiar with the idea of horror games having a darker look to them. The gloomy coloring adds to the overall oppressive atmosphere, but rarely do horror games have such a bright, or at least varied, color palette. In an interview with 61 Indie, BubbyDarkstar mentioned his inspiration came from media like Lisa the Painful, Petscop, and the previously mentioned Beyond the Black Rainbow. This explains how even when the colors become vibrant, it's able to maintain this ominous vibe. Now, this isn't the first game to do something like this. There are examples of surreal games that have a surprisingly varied color palette, but they each have their own brand of weirdness, which makes them stand out. Why I mention this is because the areas in Subway Midnight are a testament to how abstract the train can really get, especially in the latter half. There's a lot to love here. That being said, there are still some issues I have. For starters, the puzzles. There are some smaller problems like the camera is so low that obstacles can actually block the camera, or the lack of shadows making it hard to judge how close to the edge I am. I don't have a huge problem with the art gallery, but I can't say invisible mazes are exactly that fun either. I even got stuck at some point. I mainly wanted to go back to the sound design. Like I said earlier, the sound design's ability to establish an atmosphere is amazing, but there are times when the atmosphere is traded for an assault on the ears. Sooner or later, I'd have to talk about Colin's game. You're tasked with collecting gems in order to progress to the lower levels of the house. I was genuinely excited when getting here for the first time. Everything I liked about this game prior jumped to an 11 for me. The shift in perspective, the old dim PS1 look paired with the soft sound of rain on the outside got me in the mood. I wish every day was like this. Then, unintentionally or not, you stumble upon this. Doesn't seem so... Is that Jim Carrey? It was gonna be one of those sections. I'm not the biggest fan of jump scares. Most of the time it cheapens the experience for me. Jump scares can work when there's enough build-up to them, like if the thing that scares you is set up beforehand, or if the swelling of instruments leads into it. You gotta earn it. You could make the argument that the entire section was the build-up, having the limited visibility and sense of tension culminating into the jump scare, but the game already demonstrated a better example of this prior. Let's look at the start of the game when you're being chased. It's already established that you're in danger, and the tension builds until there's an audio stinger. The game just holds on the shot as the killer inches ever closer to you before fading to black. The sound is scary and leaves a strong impression, and the added bonus of not leaving me with tinnitus.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
If it sounded like I hate this section, that's not entirely true. I'm just a bit sore over things that I didn't like. It's not my favorite. The last thing to get into would be the story. If you want to get into this game without any spoilers for the ending, go to here. After passing through a room with missing persons flyers, you eventually meet up with someone familiar. Chasing after the girl, we go through rooms at the start of the game again, and right on cue, we make it all the way to the room with the lock on it, and for your troubles, you get a bad ending. You become another missing person on the train. It does a good job of mirroring the start of the game, but it's kinda disappointing. I wasn't expecting gratuitous violence or anything, but if the wiki was accurate, this lady does WWE moves when she kills people. It would have been tone annihilating and stupid, but who wouldn't want to see a child get scorpion death dropped? I sure as hell do.
You can't escape!
So about the good ending. You can't get the good ending on your first playthrough. Even if you go out of your way to help every ghost in the game, you're forced to get the bad ending. Because of these two. In order to save the twins, you need to get a specific item in Colin's game, a letter that's tucked behind some double doors in the outdoor section. But you can't exactly give the letter to Kiki because her section is way before this one, so we continue off from the bad ending. Even though the game starts us in the subway again, thankfully, this game doesn't waste your time by repeating everything, just the zones relating to the ghosts you haven't saved yet. Kiki receives the letter, and with it, the courage to stand up to the big bear. With this, we finally have what we need to save the final ghost. So we give the bear to Colin. So the twins reunite, and that checks off everyone on the train. We get the key to open the mystery lock, and we still die. But not for long.
What the fuck?
Yeah, we somehow traveled back in time. And with the key on hand, we can finally get past this giant lock. Turns out, the killer's been squatting inside the train the whole time. But before we can ponder that, we gotta get out of here. We're finally off the train, but we're not home free yet. Also, Liz is alive. The two of them make a mad dash to the exit when it turns out to be locked. Oh, good. But this time, we have friends.
You want penis enlargement pills?
So we're saved by the ghosts, and that's our good ending. Even with how abrupt it is, for all intents and purposes, the story is over when we leave the subway. Any questions someone would have about the motivation of the killer or the nature of the subway are left to interpretation. At least for the most part. We still have one more ending to explore. If you open the game at midnight, you're greeted to this. It's similar, but different. As the Ghost, you see Eleanor, aka the killer, looking over various characters we've met throughout the game. Only she doesn't give them the rock bottom this time around. It's almost like we're convincing her to not kill everyone. It turns out both the killer and the ghost have the same last name, Birch. Is this ghost her sister? Maybe that's why the twins stuck out when it came to getting the good ending. Or is it the ghost of her dead daughter? Regardless of the relationship, one thing is clear. The loss of this person drove Eleanor mad. This ending is bittersweet. Sure, everyone survives and we get off the train, but getting more insight into the killer actually makes this ending pretty somber. We don't sympathize with what she did, or what she would have done. It's a bit confusing. But now that we do, I can't help but feel a little bit bad for her. Goodbye, Subway Midnight. I really didn't know what to expect with this game. It's easy to see most games as nothing more than their influences, and even making comparisons to something when at most, the comparison is superficial. But truthfully, Subway Midnight is its own beast, and is worthy of praise. The aesthetic alone was enough to make this game one of my favorite horror games of last year, and it's definitely worth your time. If you're into walking simulators, or just in the mood for a surreal horror game, this is a definite recommend. To the more apprehensive, get it on a sale. Also, if you're interested, follow BubbyDarkstar's Twitter. Apparently a new game is in the works, so I might do a video on that one too. If you like this video, hit all the buttons. That'll help me out immensely. If you didn't, well, then tell me about it in the comments. Stay tuned for more content to come. Hopefully, sometime soon. Have a good one.